What happens for you as a principal when you're right in the middle of a conversation with a parent who is upset and the real need appears to be something different than what you were prepared for? Hi there, I'm Stan Baker, one of your hosts, along with Shelley Steele. We're retired educators who worked at adjacent school boards in Ontario with restorative practices. Our returning guest this episode is Dr. Robyn Koslowitz, Educational Director of the Targeted Parenting Institute and author of Post-Traumatic Parenting, Break the Cycle and Become the Parent You Always Wanted to Be. Dr. Robyn talks about ways in which principals and teachers can be trauma-informed by helping adults shed their backpack of personal stress so they can connect openly and with curiosity.
Hi, I'm Paula, an AI voice. This episode is brought to you by the words trauma-informed practice. Most people assume trauma-informed strategies are only for students, but research shows that schools implementing these practices also reduce teacher burnout and turnover. Another common misconception is that being trauma-informed means excusing behavior or reducing academic rigor. In fact, the most effective approaches combine high expectations with high support, sometimes called a restorative high challenge, high support model. This balance helps students build resilience, learn accountability, and succeed academically while still feeling understood and connected.
Our website, www.Restorative.Ca, is for principals who navigate difficult conversations with parents, who want to make things right, and who want to make it all about student learning. So if you're new to your role in the last 4 years, send me an email to stan@restorative.ca. Well, let's join the conversation already in progress with your host, Shelley, and me, Stan.
For me, this whole idea of being trauma-informed with the educators so that they're not carrying such a big backpack, so that when they can go to the kids, they're not coming with their own stuff. They're coming like open and curious and ready to connect to kids. And then for me, also, my other really big passion is I like to talk about everything directly in the classroom. If there's if a teacher comes to me in a school I consult with, and there's like a constant problem in her classroom, like this class, they're always so mean to each other, or this class, they just do not know how to be quiet no matter what, or this class, like assignments are optional, like they've just decided assignments are optional. I never heard this before, but assignments aren't optional. Then that is a lesson. Like, stop the curriculum of math or whatever you're teaching, and we need to teach some lessons on time management. We can tie it into curricular areas. We cannot tie it into curricular areas. We have to have a conversation about this, as opposed to it like just being this constant, like you come into consultation with Dr. Koslowitz. Again, the sixth grader having a huge fight. And again, there's politics. And again, they're being so catty. All right, we need some lessons on cattiness in sixth grade then. We're not like as opposed to it just being like the conversation and the like they're coming off the bus in a fight every single day. We got to have some conversations about conflict resolution on buses. Right. Whatever it is, I think where we get very stuck, and I get it, because if I was a classroom teacher, and like when I'm being told to finish the curriculum or else, I get that. But I also get that you can't just keep talking. I think my best experiences when I've done teacher trainings, when I've gone to schools or anything, was when I heard some like noises in the audience and I was tempted to just continue what I was saying and talk over them. And I was like, I'm hearing a lot of noise from the audience. What's going on here? And then those were the best, right? Those were the best conversations I've had with teachers. So that's my other big spiel.
What was the buzz that you heard that you had to stop and address from teachers?
So I remember in one school, I do a lot of weaving social and emotional learning into the curriculum. And I feel like everything's a social and emotional learning lesson. Like I'm saying if this class thinks homework assignments are optional, then we have to have a conversation about how do we get our obligations met and how do we manage time. And this is going to be a lesson, and maybe it's a math lesson, maybe it's not, but it's a lesson. That school, things were very political and territorial. And so what was happening was, if I said, you can teach this in literature, you can teach this in math, you can teach this in social studies, you can teach this, the teachers would be like, is it your domain? Is it my domain? You can cover that. I can. It became this whole, and they were having this debate about whose is it. That became a conversation, right? And the conversation was, so how do you guys solve these problems? What do you do? Because it sounds like you're all very territorial about what you teach and what's your responsibility and what's not your responsibility. Why is that happening? And we ended up having this whole fruitful conversation that really wasn't what I had come there to talk about. But when I got the evaluations, they found it helpful. Now, I had to make a judgment call there and I'm on the exact same problem that the principals have, that the teachers have, which is you hired me to talk for 3 hours on social and emotional learning in the middle school. And now we're talking about conflict resolution amongst teachers. That's not what I signed a contract to teach. I could theoretically get into trouble for this. Do I want to do this anyway? And I was able to say that to the teachers and own it and say, hey, I have the same problem you guys have. Right now, I have a decision to make. How am I going to make this decision? I could just keep talking. You'll do okay. It's a good workshop. I've gotten rave reviews about it in other schools. You will learn a lot about social and emotional learning in the 6th grade. It seems to me we need to learn something about conflict resolution and communication style. And it seems to me that if we learn that, we can then immediately go and model that for our kids. What do you guys want to do? But automatically the room became friendlier.
What I love about what you've done, and that's really what I think principals and teachers need to do a bit more of, is to actually stop. Stop and address whatever that particular issue is and take the time to, we got to figure out, we can't just keep passing this off to somebody else. We need to stop and have this conversation right here, right now.
I love what you're saying, Shelley. You're right. Getting to the root of it as opposed to like glossing it over and over again.
Or you could have almost reprimanded the group and said, I can't continue when there's a lot of noise going on over there. It's very difficult for me to deliver this workshop. So then as adults, they would quiet down and you deliver your workshop, but that issue is still there after you left, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then what have I really accomplished? Sometimes you do. Sometimes you say, you know what, I think we do need to stick with regularly scheduled programming as long as you hold space for, I get that there's this other whole issue going on. It certainly happens sometimes that there's something going on that isn't global to the entire group, that, is like 2 teachers have a personality clash and it's getting brought into what we're having a conversation about, but it isn't global. And then maybe we do have to continue with regularly scheduled programming, but we do have to acknowledge it.
And go back to it at some point.
And go back and say, if you guys want to come up, the 2 of you, we can have this conversation.
Yeah.
So a lot of principals and vice principals or assistant principals that we deal with are fairly new to the job. And part of what we're trying to do is come up with suggestions for them about things that they can do. If you're in a conversation with a parent and you feel that there's something else going on or there's some type of trauma, like how do you stop and shift the conversation? What do you do, or what would you suggest to a new principal in a situation like that?
So I have this model that I came up with from years of working with schools and from really coming from that place as a therapist of, I really don't like pathologizing in therapy. Even though people come in and we use a disease model, I don't like attaching that pathology to like the person's character. I once had, I was working in a hospital clinic and I had a more senior psychologist there who would say things like, oh, my 3 o'clock OCD is coming in, or my 4 o'clock narcissistic is coming in, or whatever. And I'd be like, no, but then you're not seeing Steve or Mike, right? Your 3 o'clock OCD. Your 3 o'clock OCD is many other things besides your 3 o'clock OCD. So that just never sat well with me. And it is easy in schools. It is frustrating. Like I once went to a school where I gave a teacher training and the teacher training went we were starting this whole social and emotional model where like we were doing exactly this, where if something was coming up as a conflict, we were going to teach them conflict resolution and we're going to teach them to really be good custodians of their own emotional well-being. And we wanted buy-in from the parents and we had funding. And we went all out. The principal was all into it. We're going to make this parents' evening. The parents are always complaining that we don't do enough for them and that we're not responsive enough, whatever. We're going to do a parents' evening. We're going to teach them what the kids are learning. And also we're going to have this, they say they want more, they say they want to be more involved in the education of their kids and that we're not communicative enough. We're bringing them in and they made it really accessible. Like it was a parents' evening and it was also available online. Like you could be streaming it. They went all out. Very few parents showed up, which was crushing for this assistant principal who was like pretty new in the field, very excited, very all in. And it would be very easy to pathologize the parents, right? And to just be like, these lazy people, they don't care about their kids. We can't work harder to raise their kids than they can. Look how many ways we made it accessible to them. Like you could call in as a teleconference, you could listen, you could stream it online, you can come in person. We're having supper, like there's food. Like we asked the school to vote and we did it at the time that everyone said it would be the most accessible. We were as accommodating as it could be, and you still don't show up. Right? We could pathologize, right? And I get why we would want to. It's for the same reason that my 4-year-old, when he stubs his toe on his dresser and he yells, "Yucky dresser, I hate you." It hurts. Ouch. But what does that really get us? Maybe for us for a moment to vent to each other, because ouch, I made a party and no one showed up. But then what? So I have this model that I personally use when I'm consulting in schools, because like I said, I get called in all the time when we must do something about this kid and we cannot get these parents on board. Like we cannot get these parents to see what's going on. We need their help and they're not. And the model is called curing, and it starts with connection, right? The C is connection. I've got to find a way to connect to this person. There's got to be a moment of, I'm a human and you're a human, and I care about you. I'm curious about you. I get that you have a lot of other stuff on your plate. Because there's a reason. If you're not coming in, if the school's calling you multiple times and saying your kid's going to be suspended if you don't come in, we have this concern about your kid, we need you, there's a reason you're not coming. And I don't think it's because you're lazy. Like, I've never met that lazy person. I've met defeated people. I've met cynical people. I've met paranoid people who are like, wait, this is a trick to get me into trouble in some way. I've met people who were so overwhelmed and just incapable of getting all their ducks in a row enough to come down. But I've never met someone who's just, nah, I don't care. Too bad.
No, for sure. Connection really resonates. I think for you too, Shelley, right?
Yes. Yeah. And connection does not mean different ways to try and get them, phone call, via email, etc. I've tried so many ways to connect with that parent, and they have the list of all their connection, but not truly human connection.
That connection of just, what is the barrier?
Yes.
It sounds like you're having a hard time coming in for this meeting. What could we do to make it easier for you? You know, maybe it's what guarantees are you going to need from us? Like, what would help?
I love that.
I have a short story, Stan and Robyn, about that. Again, Robyn, I was in a similar position where I would be called into when things just weren't working, right? Between parents,
right,
and the school, and could not get this mom in, could not, she won't come, etc. We set it up, she doesn't come. And you know the story, how it goes. Opened up the OSR, and somewhere buried in there was some note. The mom was agoraphobic. So she couldn't leave the house, but she's not going to phone and say that that's my reason why I can't be here. But the blame game had started. All those things that you were saying, and doesn't care, not interested. Oh, she's got better things to do with her time. No, she couldn't leave the house. Right. So without asking a few more questions, you wouldn't have found out that kind of information. And then once you know that information, it changes of our understanding of what this person might need to be able to be
right. And it's a sudden, right. And then it's just suddenly like, how do I accommodate that? Which nowadays, of course, we do have those tools. Years ago, we didn't. It would be much harder. Yeah. But yeah, crippling social anxiety, a fear of being reported to social services. There are so many reasons why, but we don't always need to know the reason. If we just come from the assumption that this is a human that I need to connect to. And not always is the connection that like thing that people do where they're like, Steven's a lovely boy. He has a great sense of humor, you know, that compliment sandwich. Sometimes that's not how you connect, right? Sometimes that's not what the parent needs for a connection. Sometimes it's, wow, it was really hard for you to make this call. And I really appreciate that you're here.
I love that. I just love that.
The acknowledgement of the effort that it's
Yeah. And then we have assessment where I really need to hear from the parent. What's their assessment of the situation? And that means I might have to manage my own emotional reactions. I actually did this wrong recently in a meeting with a school where the parents had this entire theory of why their kid was behaving the way she was. And I did not let them give me their assessment. Now, the reason I didn't let them give me their assessment is because I personally was triggered. They were basically saying their daughter was justified in bullying another child because they believe that child is so they were saying she's evil, but they were using psychotherapy terms like she has reactive attachment disorder and she gloms onto people and she has future borderline personality disorder. I know this from Dr. Google, where I was just getting so triggered that I actually didn't allow them to give me their full assessment of the situation. And afterwards I was like, I did this wrong. But that was just because this poor kid, like, not only is she being bullied, we have the parents of the bully saying, yeah, my kid's bullying her. She deserves to be bullied. Why should my child have to be in a class with a girl with this much pathology? Where I really did it wrong because I should have heard their problem. What were you saying?
What would you
Sam?
have done differently? I think it's a great example of what not to do. But if you had a do-over, what would you do differently?
What I would do differently is I would allow them to a certain extent to lay out their entire theory first. And then I would say, okay, given all of that, whether that's true or not, because it was not true, that was the other side. Given all of that, your daughter is in a classroom with someone that you believe is taking up too much of her psychological space, but she deserves the exact same amount of psychological space as your daughter. How do we move forward from here? How do we get everybody on the same page? In this particular situation, I don't know that it would have worked. Like, I have a feeling that the parents were just gonna keep going. Honestly, my assessment after meeting them for 5 minutes was, we're changing this kid's class. These two, I cannot have this. This is never gonna work. Sometimes it's just a bully child of a bully, and I can't, there's not much I can do other than you need to not be like, same thing. Like, I had that story I told you last time about the teacher who had like very heightened health anxiety and the kid who was drooling and sucking on her fingers all day long. This is just not going to work. It would take way too much work to get this teacher to have control of her health anxiety. And it's going to take way too many years of OT to get this girl not sucking on her fingers. I can't do it right now. Too much damage is happening in the interim. But I would have done better letting those parents feel more heard first before saying, hey, because the next step of the model is resourcing. Like, what resources are there to support making this work? And we don't get to resourcing till we have that full assessment. I just recently had this with a school where there's a child with ADHD, pretty pronounced ADHD. The school very much wanted this child on psychostimulants, and they had all these arguments marshaled for the parents why psychostimulants will be great, including one teacher was willing to say, I have ADHD and I never wanted to take meds, and my life changed and turned around when I started taking meds, and I think of all the years I wasted not taking stimulants and I hate them, and like, I'm so mad at myself that I didn't start earlier. They were all in on, they're going to sell the parents on this. But when we did connection assessment and resourcing, what I suddenly realized was the parents already know they're willing to give their kids this medicine. The kid does not want to take it. And the kid is refusing, and the parents do not have an ability to get the child to do something this child does not want to do. Like, they're sold. They have an older kid on stimulants, which we didn't know about until we did the assessment phase, right? They're happy. We don't need to give them more arguments. What we need to do is practical help. How do we get the Ritalin into her? Because once she's on it, it's great. And whether that's a resourcing conversation with the psychiatric nurse practitioner about, could we use a patch? Whether it's a conversation with the school nurse, can the school nurse give it? Because when it's not at home, where there's just too much going on there, and she would like have a breakfast with the nurse and take it voluntarily on her own, could we do that? Once we have the assessment and the resourcing, it's a whole different conversation. Right? It went from these bad parents who won't give their kid the stimulant she needs to, oh, there's a barrier here. They're all in. They do not practically have the ability to get this kid to take this medicine. It's become too sore of a topic between them and her at this point. They're not going to be successful here. So we're just setting them up to fail.
What I love is the aha moment is, oh, that's what it is. Let's see if we can work on that, because we're on the same team as the parents, right? As in this case, in terms of the medication. But all right, let's see what we can do together. And now we've suddenly really made a shift. Rather than coming at each other kind of like this, we're on the same team going in the same direction.
Yeah. And then it became which is the next step, is integration. Like, how do we integrate this plan into the school day and into what we're doing? Like, with this kid, it became about, if she can come in and eat breakfast with the nurse and take the medicine under the nurse's direct supervision, which was a sticking point because, like, legally, we can't just hand it to her. The nurse does have to observe her take it. That's from a risk management perspective. But then it was like, how do we get buy-in from the kid? And the buy-in from the kid was very simply, there was a project she really wanted to do in the school, but it was very delicate and she can be a little exuberant. So I'll give a different example. This is not this story, but let's pretend that it was this story. There's a class pet, but we can't trust her to be gentle with the class pet when she's not on her medication. And she really gets that it would be terrible to accidentally squeeze the gerbil too hard or whatever, right? So she can take her medicine with the nurse and then have a half hour with that pet, taking care of it, feeding it, doing all of those things after she's taken her medication, and making it integrated with her so that the kid wants this. In this situation, it was something else, but it was the same idea of you can go work on this when we know you've done what you need to do. You've got your blood sugar restored, you've eaten some food, you've taken your medicine, you're ready for your school day. And really integrating also with the teachers of, yeah, the first period of the day is basically a wash. Whatever you taught then, she didn't learn because she was in the nurse's office. She walks in, everyone else walks in 8:45. She walks in 9:45, even though she's been here on time. But that first hour of the day is she's by the nurse, then she's doing this other project, then she comes into the classroom. Do we all agree that this is a good use of school resources? Because that does mean other kids aren't getting as much private one-on-one attention. So we have to figure out if this integrates with everything else.
So really, I heard the caring model, as we've heard it so far, with that student now.
Yeah.
Connection, assessment of what needed to happen to have them take the medication, what research. So you did the same thing over again with the student, really, to get them to buy into the plan.
Exactly. You do the same thing with the kids, same thing with the teachers. Then we have normalization. And this is really important. My book is Post-Traumatic Parenting, which is all about how does trauma impact your parenting. Normalization is super important whenever a parent has a trauma history, which I believe is most parents at this point. But because we tend to see ourselves as the problem when we have a trauma history. And especially if you have a challenging child, right? You see yourself as, I'm the worst mom in the school. I'm the one who never remembers these things. I'm the only one who can't get her kid to take her Ritalin. I'm right. You just feel like such a failure. So if we normalize it and we say the moms who do remember the soccer uniform are very often the moms whose kid comes home and says, Mom, here's my soccer uniform. Please wash it. I need it for tomorrow morning. You have a kid who if they're playing Game Boy, the house could be burning down around their face and they wouldn't notice it. They're not going to remember their soccer uniform. I just heard a parent describe her kid as, you know how some kids struggle with boundaries and limits and rules? My kid doesn't struggle with them. They just don't exist.
Yeah, there's no
one
struggle.
way around it.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Oh, I love it. That's great.
Yeah, we don't take off our shoes in the middle of Target. The kid's I do.
Okay. I don't have a
Right?
problem.
And it's harder. So normalizing, it's so normal with your kid's neurology, with your family structure, with what you've been through. Like you said about this agoraphobic mom. It is so normal for someone with agoraphobia to not be able to come to a school meeting. I am so glad that Zoom exists and we were able to make that happen for you. It is so normal that a kid with sensory problems doesn't want to take their medication. That is so normal. You're not doing something bad as a parent. We just have to come up with another plan.
And that just relaxes people so much that, oh, there's other people out there, or they'll say, how did you know that? And it just takes away all that shame, or a lot of it, and sees that there's a way out when you're able to name it that way. And that it's because other people that are experiencing that as well.
Yeah.
Not so isolated.
And then we have, you're not so isolated. And then we have generation where we generate the plan and we make a plan for checking in about in a couple of weeks, is it working? What are we doing next? And we just make sure that the parents are part of the plan all the way through and if there's a lot of aha-ing, by the way, from the parents, that's also a moment for connection. You're nodding and smiling a lot. I gotta wonder though, are you agreeing or do you just want this meeting to be over because this is feeling uncomfortable? And again, saying that in a nice and kind way. And that's where, again, normalization. I do that sometimes when I have a meeting and I don't quite comprehend everything, but I'm done already. My brain's had it. I'll be yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll get that email to you. Yep, I'll write that up for you. And I have no clue. And then I'm going to be frantically Googling how to do that thing that I could have just asked about, but I just wanted to be out of that meeting. So I'll normalize it that way. Hey, I've done that. Is there a question you have? Because this is the time for those questions. And it's totally okay if you're I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, I don't know how to do it, or I can't see that happening for us. That opportunity to give voice to those barriers that might come up.
Dr. Robyn highlights that real conversations with parents and with teachers means a shift from surface compliance to authentic discussions that address root causes and that address root issues and barriers. So what resonated with you in this podcast? What challenges do you face with these difficult conversations? Take a minute to share your thoughts using the link that's in the podcast description. Difficult conversations with parents occur regularly in school, so if you've got questions, email me, stan@restorative.ca, so we can have a conversation about some of the how-tos of navigating those difficult conversations.